Hello, I'm going to go ahead and continue reading from our summer reading, I Survived the Shark Attacks of 1916. I'm going to go ahead and continue with chapter 9. Again, there are going to be about 3 or 4 parts to this book. You got to listen to all of the chapters, and then you will use this for your cereal box summer reading project. Alrighty, all of this can be found in Miss Solano's Teams account, which looks like that. Okay. Okay. Alrighty, let's begin chapter 9. The next 2 days at the diner, Chet kept waiting for the guys to come in. Every time the door opened, he looked up hoping to see them, elbowing each other to be the first to the counter. They never even walked by. Chet kept walking to work up the nerve to go and find them, and finally on Wednesday he was ready. It was another scorching hot day, the hottest yet. After the lunch rush was over, Uncle Jerry decided to close the diner early. All the ice in the restaurant had melted. The milk had curdled. You could just cook a flapjack or a pancake on the kitchen floor. I'm going home to stick my head under the water pump. Then I'm going to go swing in our hammock until the sun sets. Chet said goodbye to Uncle Jerry and headed for the creek, sure that he would find the guys playing ball in the water. But the summer swimming hole was quiet. Chet realized that they were still at the factory, and their shift wouldn't be over for another hour. While he was waiting, he noticed that there was still some splotches of ketchup on the dock. They even looked more like blood now, like evidence of a gruesome crime. He decided to try to clean them up before the guys got here, to erase all reminders of the prank. He undressed and jumped into the creek, and then he splashed some water up onto the dock, hopped out of the water, and scrubbed the stains with a handful of leaves. He took about 3 rounds of splashing and scrubbing to clean it all up. By then, Chet was so hot that he decided to take a longer swim. It was peaceful here without everyone splashing and shouting. He floated on his back under the trees, remembering how Papa had taught him to swim in the Mississippi, how Mama sat on the banks waving and clapping. He had turned to swim back to the dock when, crash, he hit something under the water, or something hit him so hard in the chest that he couldn't breathe. What was that? An old dog plague? A snapping turtle? Had Sid sneaked up on him and smacked him? The water around him looked funny, like it was filled with red smoke. Chet looked down in shock. His entire chest was scraped and oozing blood. What could have done that to him? A cold terror rose up inside him. He suddenly had the feeling that something or someone was watching him nearby. And then he saw it, a gray fin. It glistened in the bright sun as it glided slowly towards him. He had to be seeing things, or could this be another prank? Were the guys getting back? But no, this was no tile. As it got closer, Chet could see a dark shape of an enormous fish, bigger than him, even bigger than Uncle Jerry. 2 black eyes peered up through the water, and Chet had stopped. Killer eyes. Chet took off towards the shore, pounding through the water, kicking with all his might. Finally, his feet touched the bottom. He was running now, his heart hammering, a voice booming through his head. Get out of the water, get out of the water. Almost there, just a few more steps. He dove forward, landing hard in the dirt. He rolled onto his side and stared in disbelief. It was a shark, a massive shark, dirty gray on top and pure white underneath. Its jaws snapped open and closed. The teeth, jagged and needle sharp, were bigger than Chet's fingers, lined up in rows and curving inward. The shark thrashed as if it was trying to push itself up onto the bank. Chet wanted to get up and run, but he was frozen to the ground. Those killer eyes stared unblinkingly at Chet. And then, with a flick of its tail, the shark thrust itself backwards into the water. It hovered for a second on the surface, and then with a whoosh of its tail, it disappeared back down the creek. Chapter 10. Chet rose to his knees and threw up. When he could stand, he staggered over to his clothes. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely button his shirt. He shoved his feet into his boots, not even trying to lace them, and then on wobbly legs, his blood pounding in his ears, he ran up the hill and found his way to Main Street. He pushed past the ladies with their shopping baskets. He crossed the street, ignoring the honking motor car that swerved around him. A man in a buggy shouted at him to watch out. The horse whined. Chet barely noticed. He staggered into Mr. Colton's hardware store, tripping across the doorway and knocking over a display of watering cans. The clattering brought 3 customers to the front of the store. Mr. Colton hurried out from behind the counter. Chet, what's wrong? Chet opened his mouth, but he couldn't speak. What happened? Why is your shirt covered with blood? Are you bleeding? Who did this to you? A small group of customers clustered around him, their eyes filled with concern. And finally, Chet got the words out. A shark. What? Mr. Colton said. A shark, Chet repeated. Has there been another attack on the shore? Mr. Colton said. I didn't see anything in the newspaper. Chet shook his head. There's a shark in the creek. I saw it. It crashed into me. The crowd erupted into loud laughter. Mr. Colton offered a sympathetic smile and had a hand on his shoulder. It's the heat, my boy. It's driving us all a little mad. He asked one of the customers to go get Chet a drink of water. He let Chet through the laughing crowd and sat him on the stool behind the counter. A man handed Chet a tin mug of water. "Take a drink, son," Mr. Colton said, but Chet pushed it away and water splashed onto a pile of seed catalogs. "We have to warn people," but Mr. Colton just shook his head like Chet was a little kid who was sure that he had seen a unicorn galloping down the sidewalk. "There's so much garbage floating in that creek. It could have been a plank from the dock or a barrel or a—" "No, it was a shark," Chet said. "I think maybe all of those pranks are getting to you." Chet knew that he must sound crazy, that he could spend all day swearing that he had seen a shark, but nobody would believe him. Why would they? A shark in the creek? It was impossible, except that Chet had seen it with his own eyes. If he had been a step slower, he'd be dead right now, another name in the newspaper. "It's all right, son," Mr. Colton said. "How about I call Dr. J and he'll give you a ride home? You've never been in his motor car, have you?" Mr. Colton headed to the back of the store to use the telephone. The customers drifted away, shaking their heads and laughing. Nobody would believe it. Meanwhile, that shark was still in the creek, and then it hit Chet that there was one person in town who might believe him, who might know what to do. He wasn't sure, but it was his best hope. He slid off the stool and rushed out of the store. "Chet," Mr. Colton called, "where are you going?" Chet didn't turn around. He had to find Captain Wilson. He wasted enough time already. Chapter 11. Chet stood on the sagging porch of the captain's house. He barely knocked when the front door swung open. The captain stood there with a scowl on his crumpled up face. He looked at Chet like he had never seen him before. "Yes? What is this about?" he said. Chet's heart sank. He thought of what Uncle Jerry had said, that the captain's mind was like Swiss cheese, full of holes and gaps in his memory. "What is it? Are you selling something? I don't have all day," the captain said. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to bother you," Chet said. He almost turned around and walked away, but he forced himself to stay put. He stepped forward close to the captain and peered right into his eyes. "Captain," he said in a loud voice, "I saw a shark in the creek. It crashed into me." Chet lifted his shirt to show the angry-looking scrape. The captain stared at Chet's chest, and then he looked into the distance. Did he even know where he was? "I know it sounds impossible, sir. It doesn't make any sense at all." The captain looked back at Chet. "Sure it does," he said. Chet's eyes widened in surprise. "The creek empties out into the Raritan Bay, which leads right to the Atlantic. Pirates used to come to those parts, bury their treasure all around here." The captain's eyes kept getting brighter. "If the tides are high and the currents are strong, a shark could get swept up right into the creek." "Of course it could. I saw it, Captain. It was huge, and its eyes, just like you said, killer eyes," the captain murmured. Chet nodded. Why are you just standing here, son?" the captain scolded. "We need to warn people. I'm getting my boat. You get down to that swimming hole. You tell people what you saw." "What if they don't believe me?" Chet asked. The captain put a hand on Chet's shoulder. His grip was very strong. "Go," he said. Chet started shouting halfway down the big hill. "Get out of the water," he screamed. "Get out of the water. Get out now." He thundered down the path and onto the dock. "You have to get out. There's a shark." The guys were all there, but they didn't even look at Chet. "You have to believe me," Chet insisted. "This isn't a joke. You have to get out." "You hear that, Monty? There's a shark in the creek. We better get out," Sid said. Sid hoisted himself onto the dock, and Monty and Dewey followed. Was it working? Were they listening? But then Sid backed up and took a running leap off the edge of the dock. He cannonballed into the creek with an enormous splash that Chet got drenched. Monty and Dewey dove in after him. "Hey," Sid called, "if the shark attacks me, you guys can split the $500 reward from that rich guy." "That guy's dead," Monty said. "Too bad," said Sid. "Oh, shark," Monty called through cupped hands. "Here, sharkety shark, come and get us." They hooted with laughter, and Chet stood there totally helpless. That shark was probably long gone. Nobody would ever believe him. For the next 100 years, people around Elm Hills would be talking about how Chet Roscoe, the kid who had said that there was a shark in the creek, he'd be a big joke, just like the captain. Chet felt like running away, far away, all the way to California, but then he noticed Sid, strangely still in the creek. His face had gone white. His mouth was open like he was going to scream. Chet's insides turned to jelly when he saw the glistening fin moving slowly through the water. "What?" Dewey said. "Hurry," Chet cried. "Get out!" Monty and Dewey flew out of the water, but Sid seemed stuck, hypnotized. The shark was closer to the surface now, its black eyes almost glowing, its massive body looming. They all screamed at Sid, "Get out! Hurry! Come on, it's coming!" Chet heard a motor in the distance, and Captain Wilson's voice shouting, "Shark! Shark in the creek! Everyone out! Shark in the creek!" Sid still didn't move. The shark was getting closer. Suddenly, before he had a chance to think, Chet was in the water, swimming as fast as he could towards Sid. He grabbed a hold of Sid's arm and pulled him. Chet, is it real? Is it real? Sid gasped. Yes, hurry. Monty and Dewey were at the edge of the dock reaching down for him. Sid hoisted himself up and Chet planted his hands on the dock. The guys all grabbed his arms to pull him up. Chet was almost out of the water when something caught his leg. At first it felt like a giant hand was grabbing him. Then it felt like hot nails were boring into its calf. It's got my leg, Chet screamed. Pull, Sid shouted. His friends pulled. They pulled and pulled until Chet was sure that he would be torn in two. After turning, his leg finally came free. His friends hauled him onto the dock, but then the shark exploded out of the water, its jaws wide open, its teeth smeared with blood. Its gaping mouth was coming right for Chet, and then bang! A gunshot shattered the air. Time seemed to stop. The next thing Chet knew, he was sitting on the dock. Everything looked foggy and the people seemed to be moving in slow motion. He heard muffled noises, men's voices, a boat's motor, and the guys saying his name over and over. They were leaning close, still holding tight to his arms. Chet looked down and wondered what he was doing in a puddle of ketchup. Hadn't he cleaned that up? And why was the puddle getting bigger? Chet realized it wasn't the ketchup. It was blood pouring from his leg. The fog around him grew thicker until Chet couldn't see or hear a thing. Alrighty, I will be reading the rest of the book tomorrow, and then you can go ahead and start working on your summer project if you haven't started that yet. Remember, your summer project is due when you return back to school in August. Bye.